Hey guys, Saf here with another Raid Shadow Legends video. Now, I'm a little bit late recording this video. Most of you will have already decided by now if you're going for the fusion or not. But I still wanted to do this video talking about the fusion, Timit the Fool, because it seems to me that most people hate this fusion. Think he's terrible, think he's not worth going for. And I can kind of see why they might think it, but I do think he has some unique niche case scenarios where a lot of champions can't do what he does. And it's mainly revolving around his Test Your Strength ability. This ability attacks all enemies and it decreases the duration of all enemy buffs by 3 turns. Now, why is decreasing the duration of enemy buffs important? It's the one way you can remove buffs without triggering polymorph in Arena. Polymorph triggers if you steal a buff, if you remove a buff, or if you place a debuff. If any one of those 3 activations happen, then it rolls the dice for polymorph. It also rolls them separately if you do it in combination. So this is why Runtu is really bad now, because Runtu basically removes buffs, that's basically one roll of the dice, and then he places a block passive skills, that's another roll of the dice. So every single instance of him doing that on every single champion, it creates one roll of polymorph. It means that he is almost guaranteed to be sheeped in a high polymorph setting. So it's really important that we can try and find ways to remove the buffs from some of these champions, like Strengthen, like Shield, Stone Skin, all of these buffs that increase attack, you know, these buffs that kind of like cause you to lose. If we can get rid of them, it becomes a lot easier to kill enemies and a lot easier to tank the damage those enemies deal. That is why decreasing the duration of all enemy buffs is very good. Now, previously, most heroes, most champions in the game did 1 turn, which meant that, you know, most things go on for at least 2 turns, if not 3 turns in lasting gifts. Even some buffs go on for like 6 turns, like Necret the Great passives, which is really difficult to get rid of. There is one other champion in the game that does it via 2 turns, and that is Andracia. It's the only other champion, I think, is this ability here that has a chance of doing it by more than 1. And that is a 100% chance of decreasing the duration of all enemy buffs by 2 turns. With Timit being 3 turns, it's pretty much, if it lands the accuracy check, you've got a 100% chance of removing pretty much all the buffs, right? You're going to remove the buffs. There's very, very few buffs in the game that go on longer than 3 turns. Even like bolster sets are 3 turns. It can go up to 4 turns with lasting gifts, but that's a 30% roll, it's not guaranteed. Now, when it comes to Stone Skin, I did do some testing on this using Strategos Islin, because Strategos Islin is another hero that can reduce the duration of the enemy buffs by 1 turn. What I have found with the Stone Skin is you roll the 50-50 check as if you were trying to remove Stone Skin as well when it comes to reducing the duration. It doesn't seem to do it every single time. So it's not a guaranteed Stone Skin counter, but it is a pretty good chance of reducing it. I actually think this has a lot of value being 3 turns. It means that you can use him as a full accuracy check. And if you're using him with Kaja the Rai, which at the moment is a guaranteed champion available in Deck of Fates, then he's always going to get an extra turn. So you can basically strip all the buffs and then put him into increased accuracy and then place True Fear. Now, after this ability, it doesn't really matter if he gets polymorphed because he's done his job. He's got rid of the buffs. He's basically put True Fear out. And there's kind of like this thing here where you can provoke and do different things, but obviously if he's polymorphed, it's not going to work. But from a non-plat setting where you're starting to see like towards the top end of Goal 5, Tag Team Arena, where you're seeing these like Ultimate Death Knights in Stone Skin, and you're seeing like buff heavy teams in like Pythian, Duchess, Elva, or something like Pythian, Duchess, Mithrala, where basically it's designed to just sit there and become very difficult to kill. This like kind of duo where you can remove the duration of all the buffs straight into an increased accuracy AoE fear will help you break through those champions big time. It will help you breach the teams. So in that setting, I think he's quite good. Now, damage-wise, he might actually be quite good, but I think in order for him to be a nuker, he needs Kaja the Rai, right? Because you cannot build him for damage and then enough accuracy that this is going to work to get rid of all the active buffs. I also don't think you can decrease the duration of protected buffs. So things like Bolster, you can't reduce the duration, but things like Shield, you can. Things like Necret protected buffs, you can't, but the other buffs like the block debuffs, you can. So there are kind of rules and conditions here. So if you want to use him as a nuker, you kind of need to have both of these abilities going 1 turn, because this is like a 0.24, this is a 0.27 multiplier. For context, Magnar, I think, is a 0.22. Vasulf is a 0.25. So when Magnar double hits, Magnar will one-shot. So really what we're looking at is a HP based nuker needs to be around about 0.45 to 0.55 as an AoE to work. Now Taras is a bit special because he has his own multiplier based on the number of buffs. That kind of multiplies his actual multiplier, which is I think a 0.3 up to the scale that is required. But if you want a HP based damage dealer to do enough damage, they need to be around about 0.5. So these two combined, which is a 0.27 and a 0.24, gets you close enough that that is going to work. So if Kaja the Rise on the team, you can basically nuke once and nuke again. Now, so long as this doesn't cause any sort of counterattacking or weird things that causes him to die, then we should be seeing a nuke into a nuke. Rotos might interrupt him, so this might not be a good counter to Rotos. That's something to keep in mind. The nice thing about Magnar is you don't need any setup for him. He will just double hit as long as there's no HP burnout, so it makes him a counter to Rotos as well, whereas this guy needs 2 abilities. So in essence, he can do damage, I think. I think he'd be a great damage dealer, but he depends upon having Kaja the Rai to make the damage component of his kit work. Without Kaja the Rai, I don't think he's a competent nuker because you can't trust that you're going to have enough accuracy to make this work. Now, the passive provoking is kind of cool. I don't know, because I don't have access to the tester, I can't test this out, unfortunately, whether this placing a provoke debuff will happen before an enemy takes a turn or after. Now, it seems to suggest after, because whenever an enemy skill does not activate because they're under a provoke, when a skill doesn't activate, so the enemy has to use a skill, so therefore the provoke hasn't, the skill has already happened, then he provokes. So it should still force people into, in terms of wave content, like Doom Tower wave content, dungeon like climbing content, and potentially this new major content piece that they've been talking about that seems to be around the corner. Maybe this is very powerful for that. But again, you need Kaja the Rai. If not, you get a lot of turn meter. 10% every time a fear activates is quite a lot of turn meter, especially in waves. Like if you think you've got a wave of 5 enemies, and if every single enemy activates their fear, then he's going to get 50% turn meter every turn. You might find he rotates his abilities incredibly fast. He's also going to get turn meter on his A1 if there are no active buffs on the target. So he could get 20% turn meter and 50% turn meter every single turn on top of these 4-turn cooldown nuke abilities. So I actually think he's going to be one of these champions that on paper looks a bit bland, right? On paper, it's like, okay, so he does a little bit of self-healing. Okay, he drops a few duration of buffs, and he places increased accuracy and true fear. Well, that's really average, right? On paper, he looks so boring that you wouldn't even think he's actually good. But when you start putting it together, you get a lot of turn meter control. You get a lot of, essentially, a full debuff removal for most scenarios. You get guaranteed extra turns with Kaja the Rai. You get an AoE True Fear, you get an AoE Ally Increased Accuracy, and you get a lot of turn meter on the passive, and you get a Provoke with Kaja the Rai. It's 50 accuracy or in all battles. It's not too bad. It's a bit low. He's a little bit slow at 99 speed as well. Is he worth it? My number one rule when it comes to fusions. Does the champion do something that no other champion in the game can do? Is it unique? I went for Loriaka because it was a unique combination of turn meter control and decreased resistance. So there was not that many options that could do that. I went for Panda, not because I actually have a use for the Panda, but because the Panda does stuff in his passive that no other hero in the game does. He is the only champion in the game that can reduce the duration of all enemy buffs by 3 turns. We don't know how important that might be in the future, so he qualifies under the bracket of, does he do something that no other hero does, no other champion in the game does? Yes. So that's why I am going for him, because I might need that ability in the future. It is also why I'm considering going for Kaja the Rai in the deck of fates, because when you put the two of them together, they become a very potent combo. It always is the case when they do duos. Cupidus is a good damage dealer, but he doesn't become a very strong damage dealer until Venus is on the team. Astralon and Countess Lix don't become a wave control monster until they're on the team together, because then they're constantly counterattacking. It becomes really powerful. When you have the pairings together, that's when things work really, really well. Some champions don't require the pairing, like Cardiel, we know, is Giga OP on his own. It doesn't require the pairing with Cecilia, but there are other champions that do require it. And I think in this case, like Jetney and Alsgore, for example, Jetney becomes a far better damage dealer purely because she actually doesn't need as much of her setup. I'm pretty sure she basically can ignore a lot more. So here, for example, when Alsgore is on the team with Jetney, the debuff can't be resisted, so she doesn't need accuracy there. When Alsgor is on the team, she gets an extra turn if she kills someone. Now, what you want is to use this ability, because this ability is the hard-hitting damaging ability. But really, you want this ability first because it places the buffs. So Alsgor allows you to run this into that, assuming you're going to kill someone, because this should kill at least one hero. It's probably just not going to kill the tanks or the Duchesses or the Pythians or the Revivers. So you would run this into this, and then you actually have a competent damage dealer. She also ignores shield buffs as Algor's on the team. So on her own, she hits hard and she places decreased defense, but she requires accuracy and she doesn't get this guaranteed extra turn. With Alsgor on the team, she becomes a different beast. And that's what you tend to find with a lot of these newer pairings, that once you pair them together, they're very strong. So I think Timit on his own is a good champion. Timit with Kaja is a great champion, but neither of them are OP champions. This isn't a crazy fusion. This isn't like Gnut. And I know people butcher me for the way that I say the name. I'm Welsh. We say it how we see it. Gnut was just a monster. If you have him, you just break the game in terms of what you can do with him. So he was almost a guaranteed fusion you had to do. If you missed him, you were missing out. Whereas this guy, if you just decide you don't really want this and you're happy to use Androsia, I've seen a lot of people said 2 turns is good enough for me. If I need it, I'll just use Androsia. That's absolutely fine. I think that's not a problem. The only thing to know is he is Force Affinity, so this can weak hit. If it weak hits, it won't work. But that's why Kaja the Rye is important, because you get that guaranteed extra turn. So that is something to keep in mind. It is singular attacks on a Force Affinity. So again, you're going to have the similar problem that Candrathon has, where he's got to try and defeat the Duchess, and if he hasn't quite got enough raw damage to do it, it could be quite difficult to take down the Duchess Reviver. So let me know, guys, what is your opinions after you've seen some of the videos from the other content creators? Maybe you've seen some test server access from them. I don't have test server. I would really love to be able to play test him in more detail to actually show you the examples of how I think you can use him. I don't have access to that, unfortunately, but let me know what you think. Are you actually going to go for it? I'll probably put a poll up in my community threads to see what people feel about Timit the Fool. He does look a bit stupid, really. I'm not really sure why he's like in a stockade for Halloween. But, you know, there you go. I do think that Kaja looks way better as a jester. That's a very, very golden spoon, I guess. It's a very glowy spoon. Kaja just looks way better. But let me know in the comments below what you're doing. Go head over to the community tab when this goes out and vote, just to let me know what you feel about it. And, you know, for a Halloween fusion, maybe it's a little bit disappointing for a lot of people, but I do think that there is some potential unique usages. And I do think this turn meter, you know, if you can get the Kaja the Rye, that is when this champion becomes a little bit more powerful, that he really needs this Kaja the Rye to kind of unlock his full potential. But yeah, we'll see. I'm now basically hopefully recovered from Vegas. I'm still a little bit jet lagged. We're still coming back into it. So getting back into the swing of things. Hopefully I'm back on top of all of the raid content. I'm sure within a couple of days, I'll probably drop some more news or more patches for us to actually get involved in. I'm expecting this major content piece to be around the corner. So I'm getting prepared to understand hopefully what that is. And then we can get some content to talk about how we sort of take down what they're calling bigger than Doom Tower. So I'm really excited about that. I'm looking forward to some new content in Raid for the first time in a very long time. But yeah, I'll be live on stream tonight on YouTube at around about 8:30 p.m. UK time, as I think now that the clocks have gone back the same as Central Eastern time, Central European time. I don't really know. I've been in 3 different time zones in the recent days, so I have no idea where I'm at anymore. But yeah, come hang out on this channel on YouTube. I'll put a link to the video at the end because we'll schedule it. We'll probably be looking at some gear cleansing. We'll talk about the events. Maybe we'll have a look and see if we can run anything in there. Might be doing a little bit of play testing on some other champions that I've got working on as well. So if you want to come hang out, if you have any questions about Raid, if you need some help or advice, that is what we do on live streams. It's a good opportunity for everyone to talk about Raid. But thanks for watching, guys. Let me know again in those comments below if you are going for Timit the Fool, and I will catch you in the next video.